Hari Om friends, welcome to the fourth part of the series on how Britain stole $45 trillion from Bharata or India. And this is based on Professor Utsa Patnaik's work. So let's go on and see what's happening in this part. So I'll just recap very briefly. So in the last set of slides, we saw what was the situation before 1833. So roughly from 1765 to 1833, when the British got control of Bengal, and after 1803, 1804, after the Second Anglo-Maratha War, when they pretty much got control of, you can say, 60 to 70% of the Indian mainland. So the situation was basically that the taxes were collected from India, goods were bought from producers and farmers, and the producers were paid from the taxes which were collected from them. So essentially, the East India Company, which you need to remember, was a nationalized company. So it was the British Crown which was getting goods for free, and they used to sell this at massive markups into the European markets and everywhere else. Plus, there was this condition that the ships had to be officered by British captains, so all the money and revenue was essentially going into British hands. So this was the model before 1833. Now in 1833, there was a big change. I'll just go into something else before that. So from 1760s or mid 1700s till 1830s, how was this money used, which was looted from India? So this massive cash inflow from India essentially funded the industrial revolution in Britain. So people kind of get this completely wrong. They look at it the other way around, and they think that the British domination of India was due to the industrial revolution and the progress in science and technology. It was nothing like that, because the industrial revolution happened pretty much after the British conquest of India. So you have to remember that the complete conquest, or at least 70%, was done by 1803-04, and almost 40 years before that, they were slowly kind of salami slicing their way from Bengal, and Bengal was completely stripped bare. And Bengal was the richest among the richest provinces of India. So this massive money inflow was used to fund the industrial revolution, and this was also used to invest in the Americas. Australia obviously came later on, but a lot of these investments were done in Europe as well. Canada, that's another example. So again, something to remember, that the industrial revolution happened because of the money looted from India, and India didn't lose out because the British had an edge in science and technology or warfare. It was nothing like that. Otherwise, it would have. Why did it take them, close to 150 years to kind of conquer India? And they could hold it for, if we count from 1857, when they got a really jittery shake-up, then they barely managed to hold on to India for 90 years. So, what was the situation after 1833? So around 1833, this was the model which we have seen. But then in 1833, East India Company lost its monopoly, and India was opened up to trade for almost all the British manufacturers and investors. Till 1833, East India Company had that monopoly. But see, everybody wanted to jump onto the gravy train, so it was free money, free loot. So there was a lot of pressure from Christian missionaries and investors and everybody else, and especially British industry, to open up the Indian market. Till that time, the Indian market was closed because they didn't want to kill the cash cow. So, but British manufacturing put a lot of pressure, and obviously you had the pressure from missionaries and other lobbies as well. So in 1833, the East India Company, by an act of Parliament, lost its monopoly, and the Indian market was opened up. So this old model, where you had the East India Company buying goods from farmers and then kind of paying them with the revenue and then sending them off to free with a markup to Britain, could no longer work, because what was happening now, you had this direct dumping of goods after 1833. So British industry, substandard goods, all products of the industrial revolution, were now dumped into India, where you had these artisan craftsmen high quality goods produced in lower quantities, obviously, but the markets were big and the number of producers also very high. So you had that level of output as well. And this there was this direct dumping of goods. It was all tax free, whereas Indian exports were taxed very heavily, except for the exports which the British wanted to go. So this model no longer worked, where you could take stuff, tax them, and get it for free and send it. So this old model had to go. So the British had to innovate a new model of how they could kind of grab more revenues from India. So what they did was they did what I call the reverse model. So instead of trying to send stuff for free to Britain, what they did was they forced Indian farmers to grow opium, indigo, and this was exported to China. Now I would encourage you to read about. I think some of you might already be aware. There were a few wars with China known as opium wars. So there was one in 1840s and there was one in I think 1860-62. I don't remember the exact dates, but these wars were purely conducted because the Manchu administration, the Manchu emperors of China, they were against opium, and the British wanted to dump opium on China, which they were going in India because they were getting payment in silver. So this currency was known as tile, so silver tiles, TAELS, from China. So they were getting massive revenue, and they ruined entire generations of Chinese uh, with their opium. So obviously the Manchu administration was absolutely against this. And see, the British grabbed Hong Kong in one of these wars. So this was the new model. So you use India as kind of a massive labor uh, plantation or a slave labor plantation, and then you export this dr- opium to China. So the British were the biggest drug runners of their time. I mean, even the Mexican cartels don't come close to what these guys did and the amount of misery they caused. Now you have to remember that for opium, prime agricultural land was taken away. So again, another contributory factor to the massive die-off in famines, because farmers ran into massive debts. And after 1833, another breed of parasites, British parasites, came into India, and these were the British planters who grabbed prime agricultural land in Bengal. So initially Bengal was their focus from after 1833 till roughly 1860, and they did everything. So they had a free hand at raping Indian women, killing, brutalizing, land grabbing. So they did absolutely everything they could. And in 1860, what happened was there was a big revolt in Bengal. I think it was led by two brothers who were zamindars, and they executed a lot of these scumbags. And that revolt had to be put down, by the military, by the British military. So in summary, so industrial revolution was funded by wealth looted from India. After 1833, substandard, poor quality British goods were dumped on India. Rapid deindustrialization started to happen because massive tariffs were placed on Indian manufacturers, finished goods, whereas the raw material which was needed for British industry, such as cotton, etc., it was kept with low tariffs or tariff free because they had to kind of reduce the input cost. You had British parasites like planters, investors, and everybody else descend on India to make a quick buck. I mean, they were already there, but the planters came after 1833 because of this change in the law. And Indian farmers forced to grow indigo and opium, which caused misery in India and in China as well. So that's all for this time, friends. In the next part, we'll look at the situation after 1857. And I hope you have liked this video. If you have, please do remember to share, like, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Thank you.